Let's make one of my favorite, most popular recipes, my banana bread cinnamon rolls with a peanut butter cream cheese frosting. We're going to start with the yeast portion because this does take a little bit to activate. It can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes average. And we're going to have a little measuring cup and we're adding in our 1 tablespoon of honey. The full recipe will be at the bottom here too, so you guys don't have to memorize all this. For the yeast, we're going to use a rapid rise instant yeast. If you don't have the little packets like this, it is going to equate to 2 teaspoons of active yeast. The next part is we're going to add in our warm water. This is where we want to make sure that we're getting the right temperature. So I just do this right out of my kitchen sink, turn the water on hot, and we want it to be right around 110 degrees. That's going to be super key because if it's too hot, it kills the yeast. If it's too cool, it's not going to activate the yeast. So you can always put a thermometer under here to see, once it hits that 110. All right, now our water is getting pretty hot here. We're going to do half a cup. And you can either put it in a measuring cup and then pour it in here to make sure that it's exact, or you can put it right in here. You just want to make sure that you're getting half of a cup exactly. Pour that in and go ahead and mix that up. We also need to add in half of our sugar. The sugar helps activate the yeast. All right, now we're setting that aside. Let's go ahead and measure out our flour. I'm going to go over a tip on measuring, and this is going to be really key for any kind of measuring on any type of powders. When you fill up your cup, you're going to shake off that extra amount. Never pack your flour. So we're going to fill it up, shake it off, and add it to our bowl there. And I like to measure this out ahead of time, have everything all set up, especially when you're baking. It just makes it a lot easier to make sure that you're getting the exact measurements. Okay, so we have that measured out. Let's go ahead and get going on our next step over here. The next part is we have a small pan. We're going to place that over medium-low heat. We're going to add in our butter, our salt, milk, the other part of our sugar, so then it equals out the 1/3. It can start to get a little bit scalding on the edges, and then we're going to remove it from the heat, and then we're combining everything into the bowl. You can see that butter is melting. When you're using butter, I do recommend for this recipe that the butter be at room temperature. So while that's going, let's go ahead and add our bananas to the mixing bowl here. So you want to use ripe bananas. This one is really ripe. It's really soft, and sometimes they're going to be a little bit more firm, but the more black your bananas are, it's going to change the consistency, the flavor, everything of any baked good that you do bananas in. We're going to go ahead and put that on the mixer. While that's going, let's go ahead and check our milk. You can see that butter is almost melted, so turn the heat off. And we're just going to let that start to cool down just a little bit. We're going to take it off the burner and just put it in the back. So that part is done. Let's see how our bananas are doing. We want to get those nice and mashed up. Let's talk about some substitutions for the recipe too. This is a really great base recipe. So if you want to do your classic cinnamon rolls, you could use, instead of the bananas, you're going to use like a Greek yogurt. You could use a sour cream. You could do an applesauce if you wanted to do an apple flavor. So there are a lot of different possibilities, and then you can always change up the frosting too. So if you want to do a glaze, a cream cheese, chocolate, this whole part is just really a nice base, and then you can customize it from there. And I do have some customization ideas or options in the cookbook too. So we have our bananas, they're all mashed down. We're going to add in our butter milk mixture here, and you can see that the yeast is activated. So that foamy part on top here, that is the yeast being activated. And that's what we're looking for. And now we're going to add that into the mix here. And you can see I have my paddle attachment on there. That is my go-to for this specific recipe here. And now we're going to add in our flour. It's already measured out. Let's go ahead and mix this. We're going to start on low, and then we're going to build to a medium setting. Right now we're going to mix it, and then it's technically going to be kneading it, so then we don't have to knead it. The great part about this recipe is a single rise. Because it's gluten-free breads don't need technically that second rise, depending on the recipe, I should say. But in most recipes for bread, gluten-free, you're doing a single rise. It also makes it where you don't have to worry about that air coming out of it because we want that to rise. If we work it too much, sometimes it will deflate, and we want to avoid that. Now this is where we're going to let it go for a few minutes. Let's go ahead and start mixing up our filling for the inside. So we have our butter, cinnamon, and brown sugar. When you're measuring out the brown sugar, it should always be a packed brown sugar, and unless the recipe specifies, it's going to be a light brown sugar. And we're just going to mash that all together so it's kind of like a fine crumb. That's done. Now I like to just use leftover butter. We always have that tablespoon or two in the fridge, and then I just keep the wrap and we just butter the pan with that. You can also use saran wrap, works really good for this, but we want to make sure that's nice and buttered. For the baking dish, you can use a lot of different things. You can use ceramic. I'm using a cast iron that's a ceramic coated. You just want to make sure that it's the measurements that are specified below, and you can do different sizes. So we're going to do about 8 to 9 rolls in this. If you wanted to do like 4 giant rolls, you can always do that, and I would just do like an 8-inch pan. Our dough is almost ready. Come on over and I'm going to show you what it looks like here. You can see how it's almost pulling there. That's what we're looking for. Now, because this is gluten-free, it's not going to pull like a standard bread, where if you're using an all-purpose flour on this recipe, your gluten is going to activate and it's going to start to pull. This is a little bit different. We are working it enough where you do have a little bit of a pull there, and that's what we're looking for. This dough is really sticky, and also depending on your banana, it's going to play a really big factor on how sticky the dough is and how much, a little bit extra flour that we need to add in. I'm going to remove this and we're going to work right on the counter. We're going to lightly flour our surface here. You could always put down like parchment paper and then flour on top, or if you wanted to do like a cutting board, if you have a plastic cutting board, as long as it's big enough, because we're going to roll this out to about 9 by 12, less if you are going to make some giant rolls. And this dough is super, super sticky. That's what we're looking for. And we're just going to lightly flour on top. We don't want to dry the dough out, and we don't want to overwork the dough. We're going to flour the rolling pin, flour your hands. It's just going to make your life easier. Even though you're making a mess, it will make your life easier, I swear. And we're just going to gently pat the sides here because they're sticky. We want to make sure that when we're rolling this out, that the dough doesn't stick to the rolling pin and that we can get a nice shape. And we're just gently rolling, very, very gently. If you start to notice that your dough is sticking to the rolling pin, go ahead and flour a little bit more. Again, you really don't want to overwork it, but we do want it to be a little bit more square because we do want those edges to be the same thickness so one roll doesn't cook quicker than the other one. Okay, so there is our dough, and we're going to go ahead and spread the cinnamon sugar butter topping on it, and we're just going to move it around just a little bit, pat it down. So I washed my hands just because I had the brown sugar all over it, but now I'm going to put the flour back on my hands, and we are going to gently roll this. Now, if you find that it starts to stick, like right now we're getting a little bit of a sticking right here, a bench scraper is a game changer. Now we're just going to tuck these sides just a little bit because again, we want this to be as similar in size as possible to make sure that the baking is consistent. To make sure that it's like a really clean cut, I'm just going to wipe off the excess stickiness with a paper towel. You could use dental floss as a really good one. And if you wanted to, let's say, measure these out exact, so let's say I want to do like 8 or 9, cut straight down. I like to use my bench scraper here to transport, and then I just pat it down just a little bit. And you'll want to keep some room around each one because we want to make sure that we're giving it enough space to rise. They will hold up for a couple days. Microwave with like a bowl of water on the side so you can get some moisture back into them. If you have any edges that are coming undone like that guy there, we're just going to pinch those off. I'm going to grab the saran wrap and the towel, and we're going to finish these off to let them start rising. So we do want to cover the top first with like some kind of plastic to get that moisture in there. I use this instead of like saran wrap. It's kind of like a plastic coating underneath, and then we're covering the top with the towel towel. One of my favorite kitchen tools is a dough mat. This is specifically for like yeast baking breads. This first, where you have your dough mat, place a towel on top of it, and then you would place your yeasted bread where it's going to be rising, and it really helps it rise, and almost like double the time it's going to help it rise. It's an amazing tool to have. Our cinnamon rolls are out of the oven and they smell so good. Oh, and I like to just do a dollop on each one first and then spread them. It really is just like a banana bread mixed with a cinnamon roll. And when you add this when it's warm, it's just gonna melt and become so gooey, so delicious. That middle one is calling my name. The more gooey to me, the better, which works really good for Joe and I because he likes that crispy edge where I love that gooey center. Those are done. Let's go ahead and grab one and show you guys. You guys, it smells so good.